Lawmakers are taking up whether to allow specific zones where Louisianians will not be allowed to carry a concealed handgun. This comes before that new state law goes into effect that allows Louisianians to carry a handgun without any need for a state permit. Chris Welty explains why. Chris.
Liz, after amendments to Senate Bill 1 failed during the special session, Alonzo Knox's House Bill 498 aims to expand firearm-free zones. NOPD Deputy Chief Nicholas Gernon, as well as New Orleans City Council President Helena Moreno, are expected to testify today. If passed, the French Quarter Downtown Development District and Convention Center are among the major entertainment districts where guns would be prohibited. In March, Knox told Fox 8 that he supports the Second Amendment, but he does not believe allowing permitless carry serves in the interests of public safety. Knox believes New Orleans is a unique entertainment and cultural destination that needs legislation to protect residents and visitors. NOPD Superintendent Ann Kirkpatrick says when SB 1 will force how her department trains and polices.
You will see more people who are armed that we cannot check to see whether or not they are law-abiding or not.
Senate Bill 1, signed by Governor Jeff Landry, becomes law on July 4th. Those who support SB 1 argue that carrying a gun is a constitutional right that should not have an impediment. Governor Landry said criminals already carry concealed guns without regard for the law. Knox also believes the mass shooting in the Warehouse District this week is an example of why this bill needs to pass. We'll continue to monitor the committee debate and bring you the very latest. Liz?